The Taste of Things, presented by HGS Home Chef. Hudson Valley-Berkshire area cooks and food lovers of all levels know HGS Home Chef in Hillsdale, New York. The HGS stands for Hillsdale General Store, the mother company in Hillsdale, located right across the street, which is a source for home goods and gifts. More information, hillsdalegeneralstore.com/home-chef.
The avocado has become a thing in recent years, making it popular among the masses who all seem to be clamoring for avocado toast. I find these trends interesting, as if no one knew how great an avocado was before the trend started. Some time back it was kale, and who knows what the next fruit or vegetable craze may be. Avocados are officially a fruit, but I suppose we think of them as a vegetable because they are green and mostly used in savory dishes, my favorite of which is guacamole. I grew up in Texas, where Tex-Mex was always big, but we rarely had avocados in the 60s and 70s because they were so expensive and, frankly, a bit misunderstood back in those days. When I burst into adulthood in the early 1980s after going to school in New York City, I got my first job as an independent grown-up in Los Angeles. I was a ballet dancer. I lived with a group of roommates in a 1930s Spanish Revival duplex in Silver Lake. That apartment fortuitously had an old avocado tree in the backyard. Free food was a big bonus on our artists' salaries, and we took full advantage of the backyard bounty. I'd like to say it was I who expanded the culinary taste of my roommates, but alas, it was my housemate Roman, a born and bred New Yorker, who made these first batches of guacamole for the parties we threw for our fellow dancers. That was the moment I understood what a beautiful thing the avocado truly was. The avocados from our enormous tree were small, so it took a lot to feed our pals, but the flavor was buttery and, well, perfect. Now, many decades later, I have mastered guacamole, or at least perfected it to my own taste. There are several schools of thought on guacamole, some preferring it totally smooth, others like it chunky. Some like it very simply made with avocados, salsa, and a bit of salt. That'll do in a pinch, I suppose, but I prefer to use all fresh ingredients. The basics are avocados, tomatoes, onion, jalapeno, lime or lemon juice, and cilantro. Pretty simple, really. I basically eyeball the proportions, but I'm pretty generous with all the ingredients. I do have a trick, however, that I think makes my guacamole extra delicious. First, I squeeze the lemon and or limes. Truth be told, I like a mixture. I then dice the onion fairly fine and soak it in the citrus juice with a generous pinch or two of salt. I'll stir that and set it aside. What happens is the acid of the juice sort of cooks the onion, which means you don't get that harsh raw onion flavor in your guacamole. The onion is still there, but as an enhancing note rather than a distracting flavor. You don't need a ton of juice, just enough to cover the onion you just chopped. By adding the salt at this point, it incorporates more evenly with the other ingredients as you mix it all up. I do this step first because it needs to sit for about 15 minutes so the onion mellows. Meanwhile, I start dicing the jalapenos fine, chopping the tomatoes medium fine, removing the avocado pits and scooping out the flesh, and putting it all in a big bowl. Then with 2 wooden spoons, I crisscross the contents until it's a pleasingly chunky consistency. I assess it visually to make sure that my proportions feel right, then I taste, and if needed, I'll add a little more lemon or lime juice and extra salt. I always keep in mind the amount of salt, though, remembering that the corn chips will also be salted. Just before serving, I mix in a huge handful of cilantro. I used to not like cilantro, but honestly, there are some dishes that need this unique and flavorful herb, and this is definitely one of them. A few years ago, I visited Mexico City and was taken around town by a young local to visit the great food scene there. Of course, I had to have guacamole, and I trusted my friend to guide how it was to be prepared freshly at our table. I was happy to see that how they did it there was almost exactly how I make my own. The only difference was on top was sprinkled little fat grasshoppers fried in salt and lime. Thank goodness I put on my big boy pants that morning and faced this dish as a well-traveled grown-up. Honestly, I was happy to experience the whole regional dish without being too much of a wimp about it, and I can honestly say I didn't mind them a bit. They were crispy and salty with a tang of lime, but back home I revert to my gringo ways and just do chips. After all, in my view, guacamole is always the star of the show. This is Matthew White from Hillsdale General Store Home Chef with The Taste of Things.
The Taste of Things, presented by HGS Home Chef. Hudson Valley-Berkshire area cooks and food lovers of all levels know HGS Home Chef in Hillsdale, New York. The HGS stands for Hillsdale General Store, the mother company in Hillsdale, located right across the street, which is a source for home goods and gifts. More information, hillsdalegeneralstore.com/home-chef.